Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant, and I'm here today to take a look at a very little snippet of news that we've recently got from Frontier that hints at the future of Elite Dangerous. And although it's only one sentence, it potentially gives us an idea of passenger missions and what it may entail. So this is a speculation video and what we may get in Elite going forwards. So, what is this particular snippet of news that we've seen? Well, it's on the Frontier store where they're selling Elite Dangerous. They've actually changed the game packages now. Rather than buying Horizons as an entire package, you can now purchase it as a DLC, much like you'll get season passes for other games. But with this change, they've updated the description page for the game, giving us an indication of the future expansions within Horizons. It tells us 2.0 planetary landings, which we already know about obviously, as well as 2.1 the engineers, we know about that. Now what's new is 2.2 is called Guardians, 2.3 is called Commanders, and 2.4 is unknown, to be revealed at a later date. Now I'll be going into more details on some of this surrounding the changeover for the pricing packages and all that in Monday's video of 3302, but for today I want to concentrate on the patch 2.2 called Guardians. Here is the little blurb that they've got there on the website in regards to that expansion. It says coming in summer 2016, and this is what it says: take what comes and strike back with double. Bring a second ship to every combat encounter with a ship launched fighter, and defend your passengers against the deadliest threats in the galaxy. Now, we've known since EGX that ship launch fighters are indeed on the way, but we didn't know when. We now know that they're coming in patch 2.2, and that is aiming for the summer release. But what's interesting there on the blurb here is where it mentions defend your passengers against the deadliest threats in the galaxy. Now patch 2.1 is engineers, so that's bringing engineers into space stations, and patch 2.3 is commanders and multi-crew. So as of patch 2.2 there won't be anyone on your ship other than you. Supposedly multi-crew isn't coming till the following patch, so the fact that it mentions passengers can only mean that 2.2 is going to include passenger missions, and that's something I'm really excited for. I've very much been looking forward to passenger missions because it entails quite a huge overhaul of gameplay potentially. Firstly, there'll be the passengers themselves, which no doubt will use the character creation tool that Frontier have designed, that they're going to be using also to create mission agents and engineers with, and they should also be creating the faces for passengers. I'd be very surprised if that didn't happen. Now passengers obviously also mean that we need cabins on board our ship, so that would mean new module types, unless they're going to sit up front in the cockpit with us or go down into the cargo holder, and that would seem particularly unlikely, especially considering there are passenger ships already in the game, or at least at the moment there's one called the Orca, and as of the moment it doesn't actually have any active role in the game. There's also two other types of passenger ships. One is called the Dolphin and the other is called the Beluga. I believe the Dolphin is smaller than the Orca and the Beluga is larger than the Orca. In fact, it wouldn't be too unreasonable to assume that the Beluga is going to be the largest ship in the game. David Braber more or less said as much back during one of the live streams over the Christmas period, or just before that perhaps, when he was talking with Ed Lewis, one of the community managers for the game. They were discussing how ships at the moment are limited in size due to how they've got to fit through the docking slot within the stations. But David let slip that the Beluga is actually a bit too big to fit through the docking hatch, and that it actually has to do something, which he didn't go into specifics, so that it can actually dock. So we know that the other passenger ships haven't actually been forgotten. Back during the Kickstarter period of the game, David Braben did quite a few development diaries, and one in particular he spent quite a bit of time talking about passenger missions and how they could be a huge focus. It was quite clear even at that point that he didn't want passengers just to be an alternative to carrying cargo. It was clear that they actually wanted the passenger mission to be quite a bit more involved than that. And he gave an example of perhaps carrying a passenger that has an assassination contract put out on their heads, and that carrying such a passenger could put your own ship in jeopardy. David Braben also mentioned at the time that whilst carrying passengers and en route to their original destination, they may give you another request to divert and go off to another mission. When all these elements are added together, and of course it's still wild speculation at this point, but it does seem that that part of the game, passengers, would be quite dynamic. Along with the fact that Season 2 seems to be about bringing much needed life to the game. With patch 2.1 we've got engineers, so mission agents and engineers all with faces. Patch 2.2 potentially passengers with faces. Patch 2.3 you get to create your own commander and multi-crew, so you'll be able to see your friends in your own ship. So all of these do indeed seem to be about bringing life to the game. And this is one of the reasons I've been waiting for passengers for so long. Season 1 effectively gave us the infrastructure for the basics of the galaxy, and the early part of Season 2 has added the planets into that, fleshing that out with content such as characters, avatars, mission givers and passengers and things like that could well go some way to giving people the content that they're asking for. Naturally though, there are still a lot of other things that Frontier need to fix, but hopefully over time those sort of fixes will come. Focusing back on passenger missions though, my guess will be that we'll be able to carry passengers in pretty much any ship, and that you'll have modules for cabins that will determine how many passengers you're actually able to carry. With the larger ships such as the Type 9 and the Anaconda being able to carry significantly more passengers, but I would imagine that the cruise ships are a much more luxurious option for passengers, and that you'll be able to get a higher class of passenger who will pay much more money. These could also perhaps be more likely to be a target of assassination missions, especially if you're carrying dignitaries or other high-value targets. According to Elite lore, and this may well have been in other Elite games I can't quite remember, there was also the much cheaper option for passengers of actually going into your cargo hold, going into stasis into one of those cryopods where you could then transport them like that. Now whilst this was a much cheaper option for passengers, it wasn't entirely safe, or isn't entirely safe, because such passengers haven't really got any say or any control over where the pilot of the ship actually takes them. And this was actually quite a common way of how people would get sold into slavery. The question here then will be how Frontier actually managed to balance all these different elements of passenger missions. Should we indeed be getting them? Again, just speculative thoughts here. But for example, if you want to take cheap passengers into your cargo hold, put them in stasis, and then you've got the choice of selling them onto slavery or taking them to their chosen destination, there should be some type of balance there, where perhaps you get significantly more money if you do sell them on the black market, but you get a bad reputation, which perhaps makes it very much more difficult for you to get passenger missions in future. Whereas if you do send passengers to the correct location, you slowly build up your trust and reputation for those types of missions, allowing you access to the higher class of passenger. And if Frontier did decide to go with a system like that, it would fit in very well with the changes they've got planned for 2.1 for missions, and how you need to increase your reputation with factions and with mission givers in order to unlock better classes of missions. As an aside, passenger missions would of course give a specific role to the liner ships, something we don't really have at the moment in the game. Certain ships like the Anaconda and the Type 9 do have their own roles, but that's only really determined by the type of modules that you can fit to the ships, rather than the roles of the ships themselves and what missions they'll be capable of. And what I mean by that is, in my speculative thoughts here on passenger missions, you would perhaps get a higher class of passenger, the dignitaries or whatever, that would only go on board liner ships and won't board any other type of ship. I'd like to see the mission system expanded out, so that perhaps if you do a combat mission, you'd need a specific combat role of ship, and if you did a trade mission, you'd need a specific trade ship, for example. At the moment, nearly any ship can do any role, even if perhaps not quite as well as the other ones. Requiring an Anaconda or a Federal Corvette and quite a high military rank in order to access high-ranking military missions would be quite an improvement for the overall mission structure, and Frontier have actually spoken about changes to the ranking systems and the military missions in the future, which would make climbing the ranks through the superpowers much more structured. Again, we've only really got little tiny bits of information on that, little snips here and little bites there, But when you add them all together, and I could of course just be adding 2 and 2 and coming up with 5 here, but it seems to me that the whole aim is to make the game universe far more structured and much more lively than it currently is. In the early days, many of the game elements that are currently in place were often cited as placeholder. The unidentified signal sources are a good example of that, and it seems so long now that we've had them that they've become a mainstay of the game and something that appears that they would never actually change. But with Elite being a work in progress and increasingly being referred to as early access, it becomes more and more apparent of the direction that Frontier want to take the game in. So, me personally, I'm very much looking forward to passenger missions, and I really do hope that they're a part of Season 2. Frontier have confirmed, of course, that they haven't been forgotten and that they're still on the cards, so hopefully it's, fingers crossed, that they're in patch 2.2. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.